All right. So my podcast has been trial and error the entire time, right? And people still enjoy it. So that just goes to show that consistency is the name of the game with all of this, really, right? I've been doing the podcast for over a year now. So good on me, I guess. But I started out with just guest podcasts, right? And I was maybe, I don't know exactly where I was, probably around 50,000 followers at this point when I started it. But the my initial purpose was not anything related to growth. I didn't want to be the biggest podcaster in the world. I didn't want any of that. I wanted to practice articulating my voice. That is the podcast itself. And as with Twitter and a personal brand, it is your vessel for self-development. I keep saying this. And it's hard for people to understand because they don't have my entire thought process behind everything. But my purpose with this was to get better at communicating with people, not even for the sake of like business stuff. It was for the sake of like in everyday life, communicating with people. I've always wanted to be articulate. I've always wanted to pause and be able to actually gather my thoughts and, speak well. That's what the purpose of the podcast was. And so it started out, it sucked at first. And I got some of my Twitter network on there at the time and people I was connected with. But that's the other thing that it helped me do is it helped me connect with more people in a structured way where I was also delivering value and exposing them to my audience that I had growth. So it was me leading with value. And that's how I've built some of the greatest connections that I've had on Twitter. People don't realize this when starting a podcast or don't think of starting a podcast or especially a guest podcast for that reason. So if I were to go back, I would not change anything because this got me closer to Jack, with Andy, with Aaron, with Rose Drive. I'm actually meeting him next week in Austin. He's going to be here. He's going to have us come to one of his shows for free. Joey, he was actually a friend of mine in Arizona. Art of Purpose, Needy Suran, like all of these people I now have a genuine connection with that couldn't have been made any other way, even in the DMs, right? And so it was kind of just like an excuse to not only deliver value to my audience and build that deeper connection with them, but also to meet new people. Path to Manliness, all of these things. And then this is when I started to incorporate 2 episodes a week. So I did the guest podcasts week by week, or I actually think I did these twice a week as well. I was doing 2 guest podcasts a week, and this kind of, it was a blessing and a curse. This kind of made me hate calls in general. I just don't like calls anymore. And this is why I also say like, you don't know what you want until you know what you don't want. This is exactly it. Like you think you know what you want, and it's like, I want to do a podcast, and it's like, I don't want any calls. So I'm going to start to phase that out and make it more sustainable. But that came later down the road. And so Joey and I did the Modern Mastery podcast every Wednesday for quite a while. And then it alternated at this point from me and Joey to guest podcast, me and Joey. And then I started incorporating a Friday episode, which was only me, right? And I would just talk about one big idea. And going on, see, this is when I met Rob Lipsett as well. If you don't know him, he's a huge YouTuber, and it's cool to like have that connection with him now. Like if I ever want to go to Spain, I know I can hit up Rob Lipsett and be like, hey man, I'm going to be here. Let's meet. And it's as cool as that. But going on, it's like it's all a process of just like not only lifestyle design, so figuring out how you want your life to not look and how you want it to look and how you can manipulate like what you're doing to match that. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about how this can fit into your content ecosystem. So down the road, I started getting more consistent with the newsletter. There's more back here. But yeah, like one of my newsletters was why productivity advice is ruining your life. And this is when I started to get into the flow of this system as a whole with the YouTube, the podcast, everything else. And what I would do is I would just pull up the article or the newsletter, and I would open up Audacity, which is the podcast recording software. And then I would go to the actual letter itself. And at the time, this was on review. And where is it? Go down here. Wait. So then I would look at this, and then you can listen to both of these, right? And so now you can see where, like, how the content ecosystem starts to come into play, because once you have the podcast and the YouTube here, and you're promoting your products here, when you promote a newsletter every day, when you send people to a newsletter every day to go and read as like a value add to your tweets, then you're also growing your YouTube, you're also growing your podcast, and you're making sales and getting more leads from here. This is pretty much like a hub for this entire week. And then when people spread this and talk about it, it just double. It's like, this is the massive authority booster right here. And so what I would do is I would just open this up. I would have Audacity open. I'd have my mic right here, and I would just talk about it and like everything that came to mind. On the podcast, it was longer. It wasn't like the YouTube where I just read off of this, but I would like read some of it and I'd talk about it for a bit, go on tangents and other stuff. And that was really it. And that allowed me to put it in this blog post as well and embed it in here at the end of every week or whenever I recorded this, right? And so the thing with the podcast is that now I'm just doing big ideas, right? It made it so much easier for me and removed a lot of the stress. But I'm just doing big ideas now about what I want to talk about. So whether that be from my database, right, of my ideas. So I'll go here, and when it's time to record, I'll just pull one of these up and riff on it, right, and just go for 10 minutes. It's that simple, right? I don't have a set structure. I can't give you a set structure. I just start talking about it. And that is really it. If you want to kind of see how I do it, of course, you can listen to the podcast. But that's the main thing. That's how I do it. And then, of course, the actual description. So on Anchor, just follow the steps to actually getting the podcast set up. And then when you upload it, you can create a description similar to this. Doesn't have to be anything crazy, but this is where everything starts to come full circle, right? You can use this on YouTube. And this is since I'm doing the big ideas now, it's not entirely related to a newsletter. This is just like, I just write a summary. Don't overcomplicate it. But if it's the same as the newsletter and your YouTube, then you just have the entire description for both. And this is like the intro or the featured section of the actual newsletter itself, right? So it's pretty dang simple, right? So that's about it. And this will continue to come together in the very last section of this module where I go over my entire process for all of this.